I don't think he believes that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think any tech person believes that, because most successful programmers and tech people are the ones that find the easy solution and not the ones that found the solution that takes forever. What's up, Matt?
no, it's on me.
Doesn't matter.
Hey, team.
Hey, Matt.
What you got?
Yeah, so second try. You sent me an article, which I didn't read, but we're gonna, I guess, look at it together. You read it like a month ago, and because we didn't read it, we just want to kind of give our opinion, I guess, on the titles of the sections. So it's a list by Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, correct?
For now. Yeah.
Well, he is, and he was, and then he wasn't. I don't even know what's going on there.
Changing is like Beautiful, the TV series.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at some point, I think ChatGPT 5 will be the CEO, probably. So.
Yeah, I wonder if we would. So the article is about how to be successful. I wonder if ChatGPT wrote
the article. Could be. Anyway, so let's get started. He starts the list off with compound yourself, which I think maybe you can explain to me, because I mean I can read it while we talk, but I think it makes sense since you read it to explain to me what he means by it.
You're calling me out. It's like, you know, when you do we're in class in high school. And okay, I honestly don't remember it. So that's
I'm reading the start. Compounding is magic. I mean, compounding as in the sense of investing, I guess he means. So because of exponentials.
I think we had a conversation about thing of compounding. Yeah.
I mean, in the financial sense, we definitely did. I think compounding is beautiful. I mean, yeah. So what he means, I'm pretty sure, without reading the text, is that when your return on an investment creates more return, right? So like in investing, but it can also be said for anything in life, really. Like education in particular. I think education has a compounding effect usually, because the more you know, the more knowledge it creates, and the more return it creates, the more time it creates to learn more stuff and so on, right? So I'm guessing that's what he means.
Yeah, I think
without reading the article.
Yeah, I think that's I love it. So I think what he means here is, you know, generally the career path is, so he talks like linear, right? Like a career path is linear. You do one thing, you get promoted, you do another thing. He calls it linear. My vocabulary would be like organic, right? Like it grows in an organic way. I think what he's saying here is try to look for opportunities that give you a huge bump to make it like easier to understand. I think that's a concept. Like you find the nice situations, opportunities, combination of like circumstances that give you the edge so that you can actually bump up your career. That's what you should aim for.
Yeah, I think one of the things where compounding, most people don't consider compounding, is in the way they invest their own time, right? I think that's probably also where he's going with this, which is, for example, I think most normal jobs, quote unquote, are you put 1 hour of time in, you get 1 unit of money back, right? Yeah. Whatever it is. And, you know, the way that business people usually think, or like entrepreneurs usually think, is I'm going to put a certain amount of time in, and then I'm going to stop working on it, and it's going to return interest, whatever the interest is, money or something else. Maybe it's connections, maybe it's whatever, over a long period of time. And then I can invest another unit of time in something else, which again is going to return some type of interest for a long period of time, and then keep investing in different things, just like in the stock market, right? So, and I think like you and I, we definitely follow this more or less. I think we start projects, and a lot of them keep returning to us, even though we don't actively work on them anymore. And we reduce the time that we spend in them over time, so that they keep returning the same amount, but we put less effort in.
Right. And the way he mentions, which by the way is like, of course, he didn't invent anything here, but he's saying, you know, you use leverage, right? Basically, yes, you put less effort in, like you put less of your own energy into it, but somebody or something else does it for you, right? And he says, I'm reading here, he says, you know, there are many ways to get this leverage, such as capital, technology, brand, network effects, and managing people, which makes sense. They're all leverage. Interesting that I follow on capital, technology, brand, and people, right? Those are, brand is interesting because not a lot of people talk about that, but it's true that, because you could argue that that's not a first principle. Like, brand is the effect of having put capital, technology, and people into creating something that then in itself, produce value, or at least attracts people, let's say, in the case of brand. But network effect and managing people, in a way, they're kind of like, I find them to be closely related. Like, they're kind of like the same thing. People, like, you could argue it's the group people. Like, it could be managing people, it could be people affiliated with you. There's also, it's a concept that other entrepreneurs talk about, which makes sense, right? Like, if you create something where a circumstance where there's something else that you leverage, you can stop putting your own direct effort.
Maybe
company, right?
In a sentence, what is leverage? Leverage is using someone else's resources to multiple the output of something you put in, right? And usually it's money, but it can be capital, it can be human capital or something else, right? So, like, for 1 unit of something you put in and an additional several units of someone else, you can triple, quadruple, quintuple your output, right?
Yeah, the thing, and this opens up another potential conversation, is the thing I always struggle with is you need time and effort to create the system to run for you, and that, like, to put the leverage in place so that, like, that runs for you. And on the other end, the learning happens two ways. You either study or, like, read about something, or you practice, right? You could argue those are two ways. And by working on something, you do this deliberate practice. Like, you actually do the thing and you try yourself with, you measure yourself with it, and you fail and you try again.
Yeah.
I always struggle with making space for the other kind of learning, which is reading, studying, because to me, it's more passive in the immediate, because I'm not engaging with the word. I'm there, but it is so valuable on the other end, right?
Yeah.
And
like, just I guess, I know what you mean. Like, the osmotic knowledge that you gather if you consume different types of media, right?
Yeah, it gives you a ton of ideas. But it's like, the way I always envision it is, I mean, for myself, is it's like a battery. Like, if I read a couple of articles or I watch a couple of videos that are, like, on a specific topic that I want to learn about, I get charged up so much that, like, also increases kind of a bit of, like, my anxiety.
In terms of motivation?
Yeah, like motivation. Like, I have now 10,000 ideas that came from that.
Yeah, that always happens to me when I read the Elon Musk biography, the first one, because, like, you read about all this great. I mean, I've read it like 2 or 3 times now, and every time I read it, I'm, like, so motivated to start something. Well, it dissipates over time, but
it does. But then in the immediate, you're like, okay, now I have to, and that easily for me translates into, like, the anxiety of, like, I have to do so many things. I have so little time, right? And so I'm trying to reduce that, but on the other hand, it's very valuable. So I don't know. That's a personal struggle of, like, I'm very much a doer, less of a thinker in a way. But I see, so, like, because it takes me so little of thinking to, like, get a ton of, like, ideas to act. So it's an interesting. Basically, but going back to this point, what he's saying is, like, you need to identify those opportunities, I guess, to, like, do that jump, and then use leverage to actually
I think identify opportunities where adding 2 components will not just add up the output, like 1 + 1 = 2, but, like, multiply it. So, I mean, 1 × 1 = 1. That doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. So, like, where the output, like, if you increase one output alone, it'll just go up linearly. If you increase the other input, if you increase the other input alone, it'll go up linearly. But if you increase 2 different inputs with, some effort, like, the output will increase, as a multiple, or as a product of the 2, or even exponential, which is even better. I think the last thing I want to say about this before moving on to the next point, I think, is that because, this is kind of like a nice throwback to the last episode, is that technology has made leverage so easily accessible to almost everyone now. Because like things like writing text now with ChatGPT, for example, just makes certain tasks so much easier for everyone. So I think everyone has a lot of leverage at their fingertips if they know how to use it already, even if they don't have the capital right now.
Right. No, that makes total sense. I think another point, like two things that are connected that I see in his first point, connected to this and connected with each other, are at some point here he says, I always wanted to be a project that I take on, the project that I take on, right? I want it to be a project that, if successful, will make the rest of my career look like a footnote. Now, this is a risk. I mean, I see what he's saying, but it goes really against the Alex Hormozi, going back to his lesson, what he says, which is like engage, learn by doing, learn by making the mistakes, and then gradually increase your vision and like your goals, because aiming for the Hail Mary, aiming for like the moon directly will make you, if you fail and the likelihood is higher and you don't have the resources, you will think that you're not fit for the role of like, creating what you wanted to create in the first place, and then it'll make you basically stop pursuing that. And so I see what he means, what Sam Altman means, but I think taking this as a general rule for everybody, it's probably a mistake, because I see also the value of like setting goals in a gradual way. So it's a problem. I think the problem here is that it's sort of balancing out the two things. You don't want to set yourself goals that are too easy to achieve, because otherwise you'll never really grow at the pace that you might want to. But on the other end, going for the moonshot every single time crushes your self-esteem if you don't achieve that, and the likelihood is lower because you don't have the equipment, the skills, really, because you haven't achieved lower end goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think they disagree with each other, the 2 points. I think both of these people, Sam Altman and Alex Hormozi, are big into investing not in the financial sense, but investing in something that has returns over the long term, right? So it can be investing your time in a business, and investing your time in relationships, which I think human capital and actually goodwill and network are huge, right? Like I think I'm learning more and more how important goodwill is. Yeah. And I think almost every successful business person knows that people are one of the biggest kind of like buckets of capital that you can have, because people open doors, right? And but also investing in yourself, right? Investing in your health, investing in your education. I think these things definitely have a compound interest effect. Like if you're healthy, you're going to produce much more over the long term. Like sleeping is an investment in yourself, right? We talk about this all the time. Absolutely. Your nutrition, all these things, and your education as well. Like all of these have a compounding effect over the long term instead of the short term. So long term vision, in a sense.
Yeah, I think people, it makes sense. Like one aspect that's interesting to think about is the other day I was reading, I don't remember who said something on the lines of, I want people around me to become, like, I want to create a path for the people around me to become very successful without focusing on me becoming successful, because I know that if I do that, they will make me even more successful than I can dream of. So the point he makes,
I like this a lot.
It's like focus on other people's success. They will get back to you more than you could ever think of, like asking them, right? Which makes sense, because it's true that it's like when you're around people and you make them feel happy with themselves, they want to hang out more with you, and it's the same thing as like that's in general in relationships, but then also in business. If you go about business, the more you make other people like wealthy, the more they will want to do business with you, because besides the association of like, oh, he makes me wealthy, there's also the practical steps of like, I trust this person because he's always doing my interest besides his interest, right? So
yeah. There's like I think we should move on. Now I thought of one more thing to say, so I'll say it. I think it was Alex Hormozy that said it, and I really loved it about what status means, or where you get how to get status. And I think the sentence was, the person who gives more to the group than he receives is the person with the most status.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I really love that. I think I put a reminder of that because I totally agree. I think like every time you help someone succeed, it creates goodwill and it creates a powerful network for you, right? If you create 10 successful people, that's actually a compounding effect also, right? If you have created 10 successful people, then you'll have 10 times the return than just investing that time in yourself.
Yeah, totally. Is second point harder to discuss? I have almost too much self-belief. So on this note, I mean, it is true that to do anything, you need to believe in yourself in the first place because you haven't done it yet. Whatever it is that you set yourself to do. So, by the way, the title is How to Be Successful. Did we talk about that? The title of the article? Okay. Yeah.
I think so.
So anyway, so all these points are related to like how to be a successful person, really. So the second is have almost too much self-belief. So the point here is it's true that you need to believe in yourself and in the fact that you can do what you set yourself to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't even start. And it's true that the baseline, I don't know what you think about this, but like what I notice is the baseline is inaction. Like around like the environment. Yeah.
That's what I see. I think that's what I see the most. I know so many people that talk about starting a business or whatever it is. And there's usually people are limited by their limiting beliefs a lot of times. People think their goals are too big, so they're not going to even start. And it does seem daunting when you have a big goal. But other people have done it. There's no reason you can't. Someone built SpaceX, someone built Apple, someone built Microsoft. Why not you? They're just regular people. Like if they can, you can. There's nothing keeping you from doing it. And anything. This is actually, I think this was from Steve Jobs' like commencement speech at Stanford or something, where he said like anything you see around you, someone built it.
Yes.
Anything. I think this is such a great thing to think about because like even like looking at my computer, it seems such a complicated thing, but a regular human with an IQ similar to yours has built it. It's not like some genius has built it. Some regular person has built it. So there's no reason you can't build a computer.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, I think every one of us has their own like passions, interests. Maybe they're not passions yet because interests become passions when you put more and more time into them, right? So you might have a lot of like side interest or things that you like, but then there's this narrative around you. I mean, I guess around most of us, which is there are paths that you should take. I think we talked about that, and the path that are a question mark or most likely to fail. And then again, if you have an interest that's close to the path that are unlikely to be successful, most of the times you don't really take part into them or don't explore or invest more time into them because you might think it's not going to go anywhere. The thing is, that's where the self-belief of like, I might make it work makes a difference. But then this balance with, and he talks about this here, self-awareness makes a lot of sense. It's like, yes, you should rely on your own opinion, but you should also like gather feedback. And again, here it's a balance of like, how much should you get the feedback and do a step back or reevaluate what you're going for or how you're doing things. I think that's really the key. The key is not about gathering feedback and reevaluating your goals, but I think it's always a matter of how, not what. Like if you want to do something, most likely there is a way. Yesterday I was listening to a podcast and somebody, I don't remember who, was talking about little memory these days, by the way. I was talking about he was talking about Richard Branson and how he started an airline in the UK, and he was like,
yeah, that was really
you listen,
Virgin Airlines.
And the thing was like he had no capital, or at least he didn't want to put any capital in that, and it's notoriously hard to start an airline without capital, even more impossible.
But wasn't it like he didn't even start, like he didn't want to start an airline? It was like, wasn't it that he wanted to fly somewhere and there was no flight, and then he decided to pull some people or something?
But the technicalities was like he started calling Boeing and to try and get a leased 747. So a 747 costs like 200 million, something like that. To buy, and then he was like, I don't want to put the money, or he didn't have, I don't remember. And so the point was like, okay, I'm gonna call Boeing and try to get it leased. And Boeing was saying they were hanging up on him. They were like, we actually have one customer per country, and in UK is British Airways, so we're not gonna give you a Boeing. Yeah. And then he eventually succeeded because like, I'm sure you have a Boeing for 747 that's there used that you're not really putting it at work. So he managed to like get it leased, and then he started with that, and then he knew the math of the business in advance, so he knew that like he could, with airlines you can actually sell tickets in advance, right? Because people purchase ticket before, and so he was getting positive cash flow, and then also he was not paying the fuel. He managed to get the fuel to be paid like 30 days after the flight happened. So he created this system where with little risk, he could start. Now, the thing is, if you think, oh, I want to start an airline, very, very hard. He, of course, was equipped, going back to the first point, was equipped with the skills to be able like to even think of a way to do this for sure. And I wouldn't even dream of that. But like the point is, he managed to figure out the how based on the what. And I think that people get stopped easily by, oh, there's one way to do it and it doesn't work, I tried. And it's not the case. There are way more infinite ways to do things, the same thing. And sometimes you have to really think creatively. And that goes back to like reading about what other people did in other scenarios.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I think not even only like the many ways it that exist to do something. I think in many cases, people just don't even get started. And I think getting started is the hardest. It's the first step is always the hardest step. I mean, it seems like such an empty statement to make, but it's so true. Like, like just like with this podcast or like with our YouTube channel, or like, people probably know going to the gym, like actually putting on your gym outfit and going to the gym is the hardest part. Once you're there, it's like, it's technically the hardest is to lift the weights, but like actually going to the gym takes the most motivation. And the same for anything. Like if you start a YouTube channel, the first video is the easiest to make, but it's the hardest to make.
But
because once you
I agree. And I think the reasons are, one takes himself too seriously. It's like, I have to do it right. People are going to watch. And it's not the case. People don't care. Yeah. And also, I mean, they don't care until they do. And when they do, generally is because you do something that has an impact on them. And then they start caring. Exactly. So up to then, you have so much room for like improvement and testing. And also like, if you, more and more these days, I'm trying to do that, but it's easy to forget of thinking everything I do. I'm like, okay, what if I do it from the perspective of, I want to try and make it fun and not taking it seriously. And it's an attempt. Everything is an attempt. I might fail, I might succeed, but I try. And this reduces a bit this constant fear of like expectation on result, and also of like what's the outside feedback on what I'm doing, right? On the podcast, what we're doing is the same. Like,
I think input goals sometimes are easier than output goals. And if you put your input goals large enough, I think you will have some good output, just statistically.
Right. And also initially everything is going to be messy anyway. So this idea of like trying to do things the right way, it stifles you, and also it makes it harder to like change your path. Like it's like with your opinions, right? You have an idea, you start fighting for your own opinion, your idea. When somebody like goes against your idea, it actually is the wrong way to look at it. Like you should, and it's hard, but you should like step back and say, evaluate. Maybe my idea is not fully right. The other person's idea is not fully right. Maybe it's a combination of both, and I can learn from that. But,
yeah, for sure. Also, I think you remember Adler and I, we started this online community
Yep.
label like many years ago. And we did. I mean, I think we did everything wrong you could do wrong with a business. Like we tried to do everything perfect, and actually, I think this goes to point number 4, like become a good salesman. But we can talk. We'll talk about it in a second. But the point is that we spent a lot of time on the thing trying to do it perfectly. But what was good about it is that we did something, and I think even though the project itself wasn't successful, and this goes back to point number 1, it gave us all the skills for all the subsequent businesses. Like none of our success stories from after would have happened if we hadn't starting a business. And I think most super successful businessmen in the world, and actually successful people, they didn't get there on their first attempt. They did something else before.
Yeah.
And
there were a lot of failures before, and then some little successes that made them gave them a glimpse of like, oh, this could actually work, because you also need that kind of motivation. They say motivation, it's actually something that you like. Willpower, not motivation. Willpower is something that you cannot really rely on a consistent basis, and I agree. It's about setting the conditions so that like you just do the thing consistently without needing so much willpower. Yeah, but ultimately, going back to the point, 3 and 4 are very close to what we were saying. Like, learn to think independently. Exactly. Like, think about the how independently, and the what. I mean, I think it's something that comes from you. Like, you have this. Everyone has this like instinctual tendency of like doing something, and then you follow that, and you figure out independently like the how. Because also, and again, that doesn't have to become another cage. The idea of like, I have to think of a creative way to do something. It's not true. As we are learning, I think, every day, if you do the same thing that others do, you're already doing something. And then you can start thinking creatively, right? Like, action is the most important first step. Then you start thinking, maybe I can do this in a different way compared to like what I see around me or what I'm already doing. And that's where you start thinking independently. But yeah.
I think what I take from this, from learn how to think independently, and also I think, one of the phrases that he uses is a phrase that you hear from Elon Musk always, or at least in relation to Elon Musk, which is thinking from first principles, is don't let other people tell you something is impossible unless it's physically impossible, in the sense that the rules of science say it's not possible. Like, you can't actually move this weight.
Right.
Like, with the amount of energy you have, because it will contradict thermodynamics or whatever. But sometimes the way that people have been doing things is not the right way, or trying to do things and not reaching their goals made it seem impossible. But then something happened, and someone approached it in a different way, and then it became possible.
Right. Exactly. And then there's that interesting effect where somebody else did something, then suddenly it becomes easy for everybody else because they've seen somebody do it.
I think Elon Musk is such a good example of that, because like everyone gave up on electric vehicles until he showed with Tesla that it's possible. Everyone gave up on reusable rockets until he showed with thinking on SpaceX. Sorry,
I wanted you to finish it.
Until SpaceX showed that you can actually land rockets, which now everyone is trying to do. So,
right.
Like before, everyone thought the normal way to do things is just to send a rocket to space and throw it away, which just seems ridiculous. But everyone thought it was the only way, and now it's not the only way anymore.
We always talk about these big names, and it makes sense because they're very inspiring. But also, I think this applies close to us. Like, there are people around us that maybe do something, like even in the day-to-day life, they do something that we're like, oh, I would like to do the same thing. And it's not that complicated now that the other person laid out to me like the way they're doing it, right? And it could be anything, or in business and outside. So another thing that I was reading recently is this guy was saying, once somebody else opens up to you the other ways that are available to do something, like the possibilities that are there, and broadens your perspective on what's possible. And it goes back to the previous conversations that we had about the desert. You remember? So I think it's interesting because it's true that the more you get exposed to what's possible in any area of life, the more that gives you inspiration and makes you believe that like you can actually do it. Of course, that's a combination of self-belief, right? You need to believe that, because when you see somebody able to do something, the immediate reaction could be, oh, of course, but I wouldn't be able, right? Or and these are like the way you think about yourself. I think it's the easiest way probably to catch how you think about yourself is when you see somebody doing something that you wanted to do and you haven't figured out, and you see how they do it. If the immediate reaction is like, oh, of course, this person is able to do it because XYZ, but I wouldn't be able, that's already, and kind of like a signal that you're not thinking, you're not like your level of self-confidence is not good enough, and you should work on that. But if the moment you instead think, okay, if this person did it, another person can, and I could be that one, that's already a good start. Or if this person did it, I can definitely do it, then it's even better, right? I think going back to that.
Yeah. So, and then point 4 is get good at sales, which I think I have learned now that it's one of the truest things ever. I mean, sales is a broad thing. And I think back in the day when I started my journey in entrepreneurship, and I had this conversation yesterday actually with my friend, that I'm building a piece of software with, is people think that ideas are so valuable, and actually they're not that valuable. I think like people have good ideas all the time, and some ideas are super, super valuable, but I think execution is much more valuable. And I think in the end, even if you have a great product, whatever it is, whatever it is you wanting to do, and sales, sales is a broad term. You can also sell yourself, which is also a big one. But if you don't know how to sell your product, then everything was for nothing. So I think like knowing how to sell something is probably, at this point, I think it's probably the most important part of starting a business, and maybe one of the most important parts of life, because you always need to sell yourself. You need to sell yourself to a potential partner, to your employer, to your school. You need to sell all the time.
And I would argue, if you know how to sell, you always have a business. Like you can make instant business basically by knowing how to sell. And
actually, you don't need to be good at anything except sales, and you're gonna have a business.
You can earn a living. And the other thing is, I think one thing I learned is the more you believe in something, the easier you're able, like the easier it is for you to sell it, because you believe in it. I think it's a combination of like believing in whatever you want to sell, and believing it's useful or it actually works, or right?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one, because like many people hate salespeople, and I hate certain types of salespeople also, because they feel like they're not genuine, like they're not truthful with what they're trying to sell you. But once the person actually believes in the thing they're selling you, it becomes easy to sell.
I think it's that the equation is very like it's really simple formula. That like believing in the thing and being empathic, like being able to communicate in a human, normal way, understanding the other person's reactions. And if you combine the two things, then you're a great seller. Yeah, of course there are tips, there are techniques, but the more people feel you're genuine in the fact that you believe in the thing you're trying to sell, and as a genuine human being, like able to communicate like normally, then without like putting up masks or like wearing like the sales hat or whatever, like the more this works. And I see it every day.
I think one of the great things about Alex Hormozi, and I think one of the reasons he's so successful right now, is that he's such a good salesman, right? And I read his book recently, I think it was the $100 million offers or whatever it's called. And he clearly is a great salesperson, right? Like he makes everything sound like it's gold. And the one thing he said, which I really liked, was selling doesn't have to mean one person takes value from the other person, but it can mean finding an agreement. That's what what his offer book is around. Finding some offer that makes it so irresistible that both people that come to the agreement, the sales transaction, whatever it is, come out as winners, instead of everyone feeling, or one person feeling as the loser of the transaction and the other one the winner, or both people sometimes feeling as a loser. There's usually a way And this is the point of society and working together. Usually, and this is compound again, right? Usually there is a way for two people to come together and finding an agreement that makes them both a winner. And then it would be stupid to say no. And that's the whole point. Why would you say no to something that you will get an advantage from? And there's usually a way to get an advantage for both people, both parties.
It's again about independent thinking, but yes, absolutely, like thinking creatively of like a good combination. And sometimes it's about not getting exactly what you want out of the sale, but like making it better for the other person as well. Again, going back to the long term, I like the concept of I don't remember the person who said that, but the playing infinite games, right? Like the more you think long term, and the more your decisions in the short term, even if they're not perfectly aligned with your goals, like 100%, they will become even beyond, like they will bring you beyond your goals, because it's just a match that happens between you and the other person. Make it easy to take risks. I mean, on this one, he wrote make it easy, because the point is that risks are never simple to take, but there are some. So I think is a combination of like training yourself on taking risks by as with everything, by starting small, taking smaller risk and growing there. That's very important. And on the other end, there is this opportunity of like creating an environment around you where even if you take a risk, you don't really like, you have a baseline cushion where even if you take a risk, it doesn't really impact your basic needs.
Make it easy to fail.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think like taking pride in where did I hear that recently? I think it was on some podcast where someone said their father or something taught them when they were children to strive for failure. Do you remember that? I don't know. Who was that? I think it was on a podcast. Someone said like that their parent, I think it was their father, taught them early on to celebrate failure and like to collect failures as like a reward instead of like looking for success, because the more you're actually trying to fail, the more success you'll have. Because like once you get over this like fear of failure, you get so good at failing that you'll become successful. I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but
that's
what
actually,
I mean.
If you want to drive a connection, I would drive it with the social dynamics. When you have fear of rejection, actually one of the best ways to overcome it, as we know, the best way to overcome it is exposure to whatever makes you afraid. But also, it can be harsh. But the thing,
to some point, right? If it kills you, then no.
But then the point is, the more the easiest way to get out of that fear of rejection is really to experience it in a controlled way, right? And so
that's also psychotherapy.
That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think, I mean, I just want to point out the first sentence he says, which I definitely think is true, that most people overestimate risk and underestimate reward. This is for sure true in Germany. And I think it's generally more true in Europe than in the States. I think Europeans are very risk averse. I find Americans less so, just because I think the spirit, also the historical reasons and the cultures around entrepreneurship. And I think like in the States, a lot of people have the goal of building a company or something. And in Europe, it's usually the goal is like getting a job. And I definitely think, both in finance and in entrepreneurship and anything else, people think it's such a disaster if they fail, like they will die or something. And usually, and this, there's like all kinds of techniques for this, like fear setting, like, Tim Ferriss's, I think it's called fear setting, right? Tim Ferriss's approach, where like, what's the worst that can happen? And usually it's really not that bad. And even if you play the game of what's the worst that can happen, usually you're wrong about that. Like the worst that can happen for most people, right? Like there's always people in situations that we can't imagine where like really if they lose their job, they're going to die. I don't know. Probably these people exist. But most people, like if they lose all their money, let's say, right? Because they invest all their money, don't be stupid with the investment.
But it's really a cultural thing.
Like,
I agree with you.
Yeah, it for
because
sure.
Because if people around you like don't think it's a big deal, you end up not. You influence each other, right? People influence. So the more people around you think, okay, you tried, you failed, try again, right? The more, besides the actual tangible impact that failure can have, and so that's the control risk thing. But besides that, is emotional, right? But it's because around you it's not treated the same way. I think in the US, if you fail a company, whatever. How many did you fail? Like 3? Fine, I failed 20, right? And in Europe, it's like, I failed with a company. Wow, it's something that should be taken into consideration. I guess, as you said, there's a lot of historical reasons that I'm not even aware of, probably, but it's harder. I think this is a process that if you're exposed to to what's possible and to other like way of thinking, it's probably easier to. That's why I think people that like work in environments abroad might be more risk prone in a way, because they learned that, depends where was the abroad, but like the UK, US markets, like I think it's you come back and you're like, okay, I can try things out, it's not going to be a big deal. I see that a lot.
Yeah. And then one thing he also says is, which I really like, is it kind of goes to the compounding also. Look for small bets that you can make where you lose 1x if you're wrong, but make 100x if it works. And just statistically, if you do this a number of times, if you do this 100 times, you'll be rich or super successful, whatever it is. You lose a lot of times, but the one time that you don't lose, you make up for all the losses.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So,
but then it's a really long-term view, because it's like, maybe I failed for years and then eventually I'll hit the goal. And then
that's why I think the risks you take should be small risks. Like, I mean, this is what I told my friend the other day. Like, I think don't work for 1 hour for 1 year on building your product. Work for 2 weeks and launch it.
Yeah, I think you could summarize, I guess. The problem is that today, like, there's a lot of like short-term thinking in the, like, I think it's ingrained in everyone's daily life of like thinking about really short-term, on the immediate. Even in the immediate, like, I don't feel good now, I need to feel good now. Let me do something that makes me feel good now. And so like we kind of lose the long-term thinking of, if I do the effort and I struggle now, I will eventually get better later. The problem with this is that there is an uncertainty element in everyone's life. So it is true that like if you live your life just planning and not experiencing, you miss out. So again, it's a balance. And I think that's connected to point 6 and 7, which to me are very much connected, the focus and work hard thing that he mentions, because I struggle with focus. I guess because the way I am is I'd like to do many different things and I get bored easily.
Yeah, same.
And so, but I completely agree that when I focus, that time is like valuable. Like it's like 5x the time where I'm not focused. Even if I spend 1 hour focused on doing something that I'm like, I need to take care of this, think about this through, and that it's 5x. The results of that are 5x any other like situations where I'm not focused. Totally.
I still think there's some balance there, because I think you can be too focused on one thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trade-off, right, with the other things that we said, because like you want to try different things. That's the compounding and the investment stuff, right? And the thing we just said. If you only focus on one thing, if you put in 16 hours a day to become the best, I don't know, soccer player in the world, or basketball player, or cellist or whatever, you might fail at that, and then you invested years of your life and all your energy into that. But if instead you make many small investments and many small bets at the same time, it can, that I think there's a balance.
Yeah, there is, but then it's very hard to figure out where it is the balance, because it is true that if you focus on the example you gave, you come out of that, maybe you're not the superstar that you wanted to be professionally in terms of soccer player, but you learned so much along the way by focusing on that.
Yeah, but it also makes the failure harder. So there's a contradiction there, right? Because like if you put 10 years of your life just into one thing, and every day you work 16 hours in that thing, and then you fail at it, it's going to destroy your self-esteem.
But I would argue that the failure is relative. you might not be the best player, but you might have reached like a very high professional point. And it's just because your goal was to be the best ever that you feel like a failure. But you have achieved so much that you don't even realize. So the problem there is relative to what was the goal that you set, right? In a way.
But yeah, but it's also the compounding is one thing, but it's also it is still the linear thinking, right? If putting everything into one thing, and it's also not diversifying, right? We all know that we want to, this is actually the point before, we want to reduce risk, and you reduce risk by diversifying. If let's say you put everything, 10 years of your life into becoming a professional soccer player, and you're about to make it, you're about to sign for the national team, and then you lose your legs. You're screwed forever. Like this, you have no other skills.
That is true. Yeah,
you know
one thing I read and learned, it was that many people that got successful did not get successful with the number one thing they were focused on their effort and attention, but with side bets that they made. And that's interesting.
Yeah, so I'm saying the side bets
right, but they are side bets not necessarily in terms of focus, but they're more side bets in terms of like getting leverage. And it's a combination of things, and it's a complicated matter, I think, because it is true that also keeping aside, like one end is business and your professional life, but there's also your personal life, right? And this lack of distinction between the two, I think personally, is not healthy. You need to have boundaries for one and the other, also because the way your brain functions when you act in your professional life is very different from the way it functions in your personal life. Yeah, there are commonalities, but at least that's my personal experience. I function very different. If I spend too much time, if my professional life basically contaminates everyththing, like my entire day, then I start functioning in my personal life like in my professional life, and that doesn't work. I noticed that. I don't know if it's your experience as well. Yeah. But so the work hard thing, it's connected because yes, you have to work. I think there are different branches here. There's the work smart philosophy. Don't work hard, work smart. There is the work long philosophy, which is many times like mistaken by work hard. The fact that you work a lot doesn't make it hard.
Yeah.
And then because of the lack of focus in a way.
Yeah, I see.
And then there is the work hard. So these three branches, these three strategies. I think work hard, I agree. Work hard is the best, but doesn't mean long, and it doesn't mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. In that sense, I do agree. I think, for example, like my PhD, was like what 8 years or something. No, I don't think so. It was 7 years, I think. But and you'd think it's a long time, and it is a long time, right? But like I did so many other things, and actually most of the output, and there I was different from other people, and I think maybe it's like 80-20 principle kind of thing. I think most of the students that started with me worked on it for like, let's say, also 5 to 7 years. Maybe I was on the longer end, but they usually work 12 to 14 hours every day. And of course, the topic matters and so on. But I think I got most of my results in like a 3-month period where I was super, super focused. And the rest of the time, I just worked on other things. Like I worked on my companies, I worked on, on my hobbies, on myself, and all these things, and had much more free time also to travel and so on. And then I had like a period of like 3 to 6 months where most of my output came out because I was super, super focused. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe like when it's important, you need to realize it's important and focus for not forever, but for the amount of time that matters, instead of just putting in hours and hours because you think the hours matter, but the hours don't matter.
And we're going against, for once at least, Sam Altman, because he's saying hard and long pretty much is saying they are the same thing. I don't agree. I think
no, they're not. I don't think he believes that, honestly.
Yeah,
I don't think any tech person believes that, because most successful programmers and tech people are the ones that find the easy solution and not the ones that found the solution that takes forever.
Yeah, but his point, I guess, is to find the easy solution, you have to spend a ton of hours. Is connected to the Hormozy thing of like deliberate practice. You should do a ton of repetition of everything, right? He comes from the gym, the fitness word. So repetition or everything in the fitness word if you want to like build muscle. But it's not true there either, I guess. There's a combination of like hard and smart, not long.
I think he's saying smart here, like, because, so for example, the sentence is most people waste most of their time on the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think like if you go into any office in the world, most of the time people spend on, you know, on their computer, whatever it is a waste of time. Almost all of it. And, you know, like I have these things a lot where like I talk to people, friends usually, they tell me what they do all day long, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I would automate this in the first week of being in that job and then not work anymore. And I feel like he's saying that. I think like focus on the things that matter. Maybe that's the focus he means. Like 80-20, right? Like identify the 20%
I
that
think
give you 80%
it still
of the
says
output.
like long hours, like you should work all the time, at least for a period of your life. Yeah,
well,
I mean, I'm not 100% sold in the sense like
No, but he literally says it is much more important to work on the right thing than it is to work many hours.
It's about
so identifying what to work on is more important than working many hours. I think we agree on that point, no?
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with you. I'm unsure.
Yeah.
Next one, be bold. I believe it's easier to do a hard startup than an easy startup. People want to be part of something exciting and feel that their work matters. Yeah, so that's connected to like get
I think it's
people.
kind of the
but
same
then again,
yeah.
being bold, thinking for yourself, believing in yourself is kind of the same thing. Be willful. A big secret is that you can bend the word to your will a surprising percentage of the time. Most people don't even try. Yeah, that's the point. That's the story of the Richard Branson thing. Like, trying is important.
We
doing
right?
the attempt is important. I think the concept of thinking in advance that something won't work is really a bad habit that one should stop taking part of. Be hard.
Yeah, I think. No, I think at this point, I feel like some of this is repetitive, right? He said many of these already. Yeah.
Be hard to compete with. Yeah, of course, but that comes later.
And that's also very business. It's less life lesson and more business.
Build
lesson.
a network.
And
I think this like
that's a big one.
We can
building a network.
Focus here for a second. Like,
yeah, let's spend a couple of minutes because I think,
the network thing. So the big problem with the word like networking is that it's overused, and I think this gives this sense of like you do it for something in return, right? There's this concept, at least I don't know, maybe it's an Italian thing, but like, networking is like, oh, I get the contact of a person so that whenever I need, right.
But that's zero sum thinking, right. And I think, and that goes back to the compound thing. I think if you think of people as leverage and win-win, like what we said about sales, right? If you think about, and this is the reason why society works so well. If everyone just did their own thing and everyone built their own house and used their own skills to do everything for their own life, we wouldn't have skyscrapers, right. We wouldn't have cars, we wouldn't have airplanes. It's because people found a way to work together to million X their output, to like, exponentiate their output. Only that, I mean, that's the only reason why humanity is so successful. And I think if you think about your network as just a form of leverage, which it is, it's a form of capital that can leverage everything, and where it's not like I give to you and you give to me, but like we all give to all profit from it, which is how society works, right? Then I think this is,
totally. And I think the concept, I mean, he mentions, as we said before, like the concept of like the best way of networking is helping others. The more you help others, the more will get back to you without you even thinking it's right. And which kind of like defeats this idea of networking is me thinking, me asking, me like I like thinking about this for myself, but it's more of like an act of like service, of helping others. This is real networking. I think the point there is you want to help others, and there's a connect. Like every business is about people, for people, with people. Right? Like, even if you do something that you think, that there are some verticals, some business, like you could argue like stock market trading doesn't really involve customers, but it does in a way anyway, right? Like you just don't talk to those customers, you don't talk to people, but there's an act of sales, an act of buying, right? Even in that's very neutral and like virtual, and like there's no human exchange. I mean, at least not these days. In the past, there was even there. So I think the concept of like you need to create a connection with people. That's why work is part of that as well. And so if you start from that assumption, the assumption of like doing things with others for others, I think you never miss the point. And the more one closes in this individualistic way of life, where like I try to attract and retain things for myself and there's no sharing involved, the less you really go through life successfully, I think, because there's no exchange. Exchange, as you said, is actually in the basis of everything that we do. Yeah.
I think it goes back to some of the other stuff we said. I think human capital is probably the most valuable form of capital, and I think goodwill in particular is one of the most valuable form of capital. And I realize it more and more. I think if you have people on your side, life is just easier. And if you have help other people, I think everyone is succeeding, right? If everyone helps everyone, then everyone is succeeding. And this is kind of like the game theory stuff, but usually the best strategy is to cooperate. That's usually the best strategy, and I think this also shows it. I think we can wrap it up here. I think the last two things are
very capitalistic.
Them.
You get rich by owning things and be internally driven.
I agree. I think replacing the idea of like 1 hour of time is worth so much, and more like owning something will return money over a long period of time. I think this is a mindset that most people should get into, and I think it's generally true because it goes back to compounding. But I think
I would argue, I would add a piece. Yeah, I totally agree. I would add a piece. You get rich by owning things and share a portion of those. I think that goes back to the thing of networking, of like helping others. Of this, like if you own a thing for yourself, it has less.
Actually, maybe the problem is the word owning. I would say you get rich by investing in things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Instead of and people also. And I mean the last one is be internally driven, which I don't think we need to get into that one. But don't do things for the numbers and for the to impress other people. But I think this is a long psychological episode here we could do. So I think we can leave it at that.